Welcome to Cherry Blossom BL Story, where emotions bloom and stories unfold. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's chapter. The bar was quiet, the blue neon humming overhead. Ilya Moon wiped a glass, unaware of the eyes on him. Sharp, lingering, hungry. One smile too long, one stepped too close. Then the drink he reached for tasted wrong. Dizziness blurred the edges of the room. The hallways twisted beneath him, doors looming like predators. He stumbled into the wrong room. And there, in the shadows, a man waited, dominant, cold, dangerous. Sojun Dardari, the alpha who could protect him or destroy him. And outside, a city full of enemies was closing in, fast. Chapter 1, The Omega at the Blue Bar. The neon outside the blue bar bled into the rain, turning the alley a bruised shade of cobalt. Ilya Moon paused beneath the flickering sign and pulled his coat tighter, breathing once, slow, careful, before stepping inside. Night work paid better. Night work didn't ask questions. Music hummed low and smooth, a saxophone crying softly through hidden speakers. The bar smelled of citrus cleanser, old wood, and alcohol layered so thick it blurred into one taste. Ilya slipped behind the counter, tied his apron, and checked the vials tucked safely at his wrist. Suppressant. Strong enough to keep his omega scent leashed, weak enough that his head wouldn't ache by midnight. He hated the chemical tang it left in his throat, but he hated the alternative more. Moon, the bartender called without looking up. Table 3 needs refills. I've got it, Ilya said. His voice was gentle. People told him that a lot, like it belonged to someone who apologized even when he wasn't wrong. He moved through the bar with practiced quiet, shoulders slightly rounded, eyes down. Being noticed was dangerous. Being remembered was worse. Blue bars were for alphas with too much money and nowhere to put their restlessness. For betas who wanted to feel bold. For omegas who had learned how to disappear in plain sight. Ilya had learned early. He set glasses down, wiped spills, smiled when required. A soft smile, polite and distant. His hands were steady. His pulse was not. Every time someone leaned too close, he felt it. His body's traitorous awareness, the instinct that whispered one uneven as he stood still. At the far end of the counter, Kang Jisoo watched him. Ilya didn't know when the man had become a regular. One night he was simply there. Then he was there again, and again, until his presence felt like a stain that wouldn't wash out. Jisoo dressed well, tailored coats, a watch that caught the light. His smile was all teeth and patience, the kind that suggested he enjoyed waiting. Their eyes met. Ilya looked away first. Moon, Jisoo said, lifting 2 fingers. Another drink. Ilya brought it, careful not to rush. He placed the glass on a napkin. The rim turned away from Jisoo's hand. Small habits kept him safe. Sometimes. Working hard tonight, Jisoo said, voice warm. You always do. Thank you, Ilya replied, already stepping back. Jisoo's fingers brushed his wrist. It was barely a touch. Barely anything at all. Ilya still flinched. Sorry, Jisoo said, not sounding sorry. His gaze dipped, lingering where the suppressant bracelet rested. You're always so careful. Ilya forced his smile to hold. Can I get you anything else? Jisoo chuckled. Just you looking at me like that. Ilya retreated behind the bar, heart thudding too loud in his ears. He washed a glass that was already clean. The night stretched on, slow and sticky. Every laugh felt too sharp. Every shadow too close. Debt numbers ran through his mind like a cruel chant. Rent, interest. The man who had smiled kindly while explaining how penalties worked. Night shifts chipped at the total coin by coin. He could endure this. He had endured worse. Still, when he felt Jaizu's gaze on his back, the hairs at his neck rose. Near closing, the rain intensified, drumming against the windows. The bar thinned out. Jaizu remained, nursing his drink, watching. "Walk you home?" he asked as Ilya stacked stools. "No," Ilya said quickly. Then softer, "Thank you." Jaizu stood, unhurried. "Another time then." He smiled again. "Too long?" "Too certain." When Ilya finally stepped back into the rain, the blue light followed him, stretching his shadow down the alley. He didn't look back. He didn't have to. He could feel the eyes on him anyway. Chapter 2: Obsession. Morning light filtered weakly through the narrow windows of the blue bar, turning last night's spilled liquor into dull stains on the floor. Ilya wiped the counter in slow, even strokes, his body still heavy with exhaustion. Day shifts were quieter, safer, but they paid less. He took them anyway when he could, if only to breathe without feeling watched. The bell above the door chimed. His hand stilled. Kang Jaizu stepped inside like he owned the place. He looked different in daylight, sharper somehow. The softness of dim lights no longer blurred the edges of his smile. His coat was draped perfectly over one arm, his hair neat, his expression relaxed. Too relaxed. "Ilya," he said, as if tasting the name. "Didn't expect to see you during the day." Ilya straightened, fingers tightening around the cloth. "I'm working?" Jaizu chuckled. "Obviously." He leaned against the counter, close enough that Ilya could smell him. Clean, expensive, alpha confidence wrapped in cologne. Ilya subtly shifted back, pulse ticking up despite himself. "I was thinking about you," Jaizu continued. "All night." Ilya's stomach sank. "I'm busy," he said carefully. "That's fine." Jaizu's eyes didn't move from his face. "Have dinner with me instead, tonight." Ilya inhaled, slow and steady, the way he always did before saying no. "No." The word landed between them, quiet but firm. Jaizu blinked. "I don't go out with customers," Ilya added, voice polite, unyielding. "Please don't ask again." For a moment, something flickered behind Jaizu's eyes, surprise, then disbelief. He laughed softly, as if Ilya had told a joke only he didn't understand. "You're serious?" "Yes." The silence stretched. Jaizu straightened, smoothing his sleeve. His smile returned, but it no longer reached his eyes. "You misunderstand me, Ilya. I don't ask for things I can't have." "I'm sorry," Ilya said, though he wasn't sure why. "I really am." Jaizu studied him, head tilted slightly, like a collector assessing a fragile object. "You don't need to apologize." He stepped back, offering a small bow that felt more mocking than polite. "We'll talk again," he said. Then he left. The bell chimed. The door closed. Ilya exhaled shakily and pressed a hand to his chest. His heart wouldn't slow. Something about that look, cool, intent, made his skin crawl. He told himself he was imagining things. Customers didn't like rejection. That was normal. Still, when his shift ended, he took the long way home. Then how? That night, Jaizu sat alone in his apartment, lights off, city glow bleeding through the glass. He loosened his tie and replayed the moment again and again. "No. I. Why nanda?" The word echoed, sharp and humiliating. No one had ever said that to him before. Not like that. Not without fear. Not without apology soaked in desperation. Ilya's refusal hadn't been loud or dramatic. It had been calm. Final. Jaizu's fingers curled slowly around his glass. An omega like that shouldn't look at him with indifference. Shouldn't walk away untouched. Ilya didn't understand what he was rejecting. Comfort, security, protection, belonging. Jisoo smiled faintly. He would teach him. Outside, the city pulsed, unaware that something had shifted. Somewhere between desire and resentment, a decision settled into place. Cold, deliberate, irreversible. If Ilya Moon wouldn't choose him, then Ilya Moon would be taken. And this time, Jisoo would make sure there was no room left to say no. Chapter 3. A Poisoned Drink. The blue bar pulsed with life that night. Bodies packed close, laughter spilling over music that throbbed deep in the chest. Blue light washed everything soft and unreal, blurring edges, disguising intentions. It was the kind of crowd that made Ilya's skin prickle. Too many scents layered together, too much heat, too many eyes. He adjusted his suppressant bracelet again, thumb pressing hard against the vial until it clicked. Just get through the shift. Yaoi. Orders came fast. Drinks slid across the counter. Alphas leaned too close. Betas shouted over the music. Hands waved for attention. Ilya moved automatically, a practiced calm masking the tight knot forming in his stomach. Then he felt it. That familiar awareness. He didn't need to look to know Kang Jisoo was there. When he finally did glance up, Jisoo was seated near the back, half hidden by shadows, watching with open patience. His gaze followed Ilya's every movement, unblinking, possessive. A slow smile curved his lips when their eyes met. Ilya looked away immediately. "Moon!" the bartender shouted. "Private room service, VIP hallway." Ilya swallowed. "Which room?" 101, the bartender replied. Guy paid up front. Ilya's heart skipped. He hesitated only a second before nodding. Refusing wasn't an option. Tips from private rooms helped more than anything else. He prepared the tray, 2 glasses, 1 bottle. As he turned, Jisoo appeared at the counter, close enough that Ilya startled. "Busy night," Jisoo said pleasantly. "Yes," Ilya replied, stepping sideways. "I ordered something special," Jisoo continued. "For you? I don't drink on shift." Jisoo laughed softly. "Just a sip, courtesy." Before Ilya could refuse again, Jisoo reached out and set a glass on the tray. His fingers brushed the rim, lingering for the briefest moment. The liquid inside caught the light, clear, harmless looking. Nothing seemed wrong. Against his better judgment, and with the bartender watching, Ilya lifted the glass and took a small sip. The taste was faintly sweet. Too sweet. He barely had time to register the mistake before warmth spread through his veins. Not the gentle burn of alcohol, but something heavier. Slower. His head swam. The room tilted, light streaking into long blue lines. I need a moment," he murmured. Jisoo's hand was suddenly at his elbow, firm. "You don't look well. Let me help you." "No." Ilya pulled back, panic blooming sharp and fast. His bracelet felt hot against his skin. The suppressant was failing. He could feel it unraveling, his body responding in ways he couldn't control. Scent leaked. Not much, but enough. Enough for Jisoo's pupils to dilate. "There you are," Jisoo whispered, voice low. "Come on, room 101 is quiet." Fear cut through the haze. Ilya twisted free with a strength born of desperation. The tray crashed to the floor, glass shattering. Someone shouted. The music swallowed the noise. He ran. The hallway blurred as he stumbled past closed doors, breath coming in ragged gasps. His legs felt wrong, too light, too heavy. His vision tunneled. He could feel his scent trailing behind him like a flare. Wrong, .gang. Something is wrong. Wei Zhen. Jisoo's footsteps echoed somewhere behind him. Ilya, Jisoo called, calm and certain. Don't make this difficult. Tears burned at Ilya's eyes as he pushed through a door, any door, fingers slipping on the handle. The number on the wall barely registered. 102. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. The hallway fell silent. And somewhere far too close, another presence filled the room. Cold, powerful, unmistakably alpha. Ilya swayed, the world spinning violently as his knees buckled. Fate had already shifted its course. He had just stepped straight into it. Chapter 4, Room 102. The door closed behind Ilya with a muted click that sounded far too final. The room was dim, lit by a single lamp casting warm gold across polished wood and pale walls. Thick curtains muffled the city beyond the windows. Everything smelled clean, linen, cedar, something faintly sharp and unmistakably alpha. Ilya staggered forward 2 steps before his legs gave out. He hit the carpet on his knees, hands slipping uselessly against the floor. The drug dragged at his senses, heavy and insistent, blurring the edges of the world. His chest burned with shallow breaths as panic tangled with something worse, heat blooming where it should not, his body betraying him as the suppressant finally failed. His scent spilled free, soft, sweet. Omega. Across the room, Han So-hyun looked up. He had been standing near the table, jacket still on, phone in his hand as he checked the time. He was late. Ara hated lateness. Irritation flickered across his face, already forming words he planned to say when she arrived. Then the scent hit him. So-hyun froze. It was wrong, utterly wrong, to sense an Omega here. This was a private suite reserved under his name, secured personally. No staff would enter without permission. No mistakes were tolerated. And yet, his instincts roared awake. So-hyun turned sharply, eyes locking onto the figure collapsed near the door. Slim shoulders shaking, dark hair clinging to a pale face slick with sweat. An Omega, overwhelmed and unguarded, his pheromones flooding the space like a tide. What the? So-hyun started, then stopped. Control had always been his greatest weapon. He ruled boardrooms and backrooms alike with the same calm precision. Alphas learned early that instinct was a weakness, discipline was survival. But this was a direct assault on his senses. The air felt thick, charged. His pulse thundered in his ears as something ancient and violent surged beneath his skin. Protect. Aim. Eliminate the threat. So-hyun clenched his jaw hard enough to ache. Hey, he said sharply, forcing authority into his voice. You're in the wrong room. Ilya didn't respond. He whimpered instead, curling in on himself, fingers fisting in the carpet as if grounding himself there might keep him from floating apart. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, glassy with fear and need. When they met, So-hyun's relief flooded his face, raw and desperate. Please, Ilya whispered, barely audible. Help. He tried to stand and failed, swaying forward. So-hyun moved without thinking, crossing the distance in 2 long strides. He caught Ilya before he hit the floor again, hands gripping his shoulders. Too tight, too aware. The contact detonated everything. Omega scent spiked, rich and uncontrolled. So-hyun sucked in a sharp breath through his teeth as instinct slammed into him full force. His vision narrowed. His alpha snarled inside his chest, furious at the vulnerability in his arms. He released Ilya abruptly, stepping back like he'd been burned. Stay where you are, he ordered. Ilya shook his head weakly, confusion and fear warping his features. Don't leave, he pleaded, voice breaking. Please, it hurts. The words shredded what little distance So-hyun had clawed back. This Omega wasn't seductive. He wasn't manipulative. He was drugged, terrified, and far too young looking to be here alone. The realization cut through the haze with brutal clarity. Someone had done this to him. Soyun's hands curled into fists at his sides, nails biting into his palms. Rage flared hot and focused, but it warred violently with instinct, with the pull of pheromones screaming that this Omega was his responsibility now. The door handle rattled. A sharp, unmistakable sound. Soyun's head snapped up. "Ilya!" A male voice called from the hallway. "Pleasant? Certain? Kangdizu." Soyun's expression hardened instantly. He stepped between the door and the Omega without conscious thought, broad frame blocking the view. His presence filled the room, dominant and unyielding. Another sound followed, heels clicking briskly toward the door. "I'm here," a woman's voice said. Cool, line, controlled, familiar. "You Nare." The door began to open. Behind Soyun, Ilya sagged to the floor, clinging weakly to his sleeve, unaware that the world beyond that door was about to fracture. And for the first time in years, Han Soyun realized, no matter what happened next, nothing in his life would ever return to order again. Chapter 5. Shattered Vows. The door opened fully. Yoon Ara stepped inside with measured grace, her heels silent against the carpet, her posture flawless as ever. She took in the room in a single glance. The dim light, the disheveled Alpha standing rigid near the center, the Omega collapsed at his feet, fingers clutching desperately at his sleeve. The scent hit her a heartbeat later. Omega pheromones, thick, sweet, unmistakable. Ara stopped. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. The faint hum of the city beyond the curtains felt impossibly distant, as though the world itself had stepped back to watch. Soyun turned slowly. "Ara." She lifted a hand. One simple gesture. Commanding. Final. "I see," she said. Her voice did not shake. That hurt more than anger would have. "This isn't what it looks like," Soyun said immediately, instinctively, though the words tasted hollow even to him. He glanced back at Ilya, who was trembling now, eyes unfocused, clearly unwell. "He's drugged. He came in by mistake. I was..." "Enough." Ara's gaze never left Ilya. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, painfully clear. She noticed the flushed skin, the unfocused pupils, the way Soyun's body was angled, protective, instinctive, intimate in a way no explanation could undo. "You don't need to justify yourself," she said quietly. Soyun took a step toward her. "Ara, please, listen to me." That, finally, made her look at him. For the first time since she had entered the room, something cracked. "I waited," she said. "I defended you. I ignored rumors, late nights, locked doors." Her lips curved faintly, bitter. "I told myself you were a man of control." She looked back at Ilya. "And yet, here we are." The Omega shifted weakly, confusion clouding his face as he sensed the tension, but could not understand it. His grip on Soyun tightened, a small instinctive act of seeking safety. Ara exhaled slowly. "Let him go." Soyun didn't realize his hand had curled into Ilya's sleeve until the words landed. His fingers loosened, reluctantly, and Ilya slumped back against the carpet with a soft sound of distress. Something cold settled in Soyun's chest. "This ends now," Ara said. She reached up and unclasped the delicate ring at her finger, the one chosen after months of negotiations, family dinners, shared futures mapped in ink and expectation. She placed it gently on the table beside her. "I won't compete with instinct," she continued. "And I won't marry a man who brings chaos into my life." "Ara," Soyun said again, his voice lower now. Strained. "This is a mistake." She smiled at him then, small, sad, resolute. "No," she said. "This is clarity." She turned toward the door. As she reached it, she paused, not looking back. Take responsibility for what you've done, Han Seun. Just don't expect me to share the cost. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The sound echoed far louder than any shout. So-yoon stood frozen, staring at the space she had occupied moments before. The room felt hollow now, stripped of warmth, stripped of future. Years of careful planning collapsed into silence. Behind him, Ilya whimpered softly, curling inward, arms wrapped around himself as another wave of dizziness washed over him. So-yoon closed his eyes. In a single night, everything he had built, his engagement, his order, his control, had been shattered. And at his feet lay the fragile, unintended cause of it all. Chapter 6. One Night Stand. The moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting silver stripes across the rumpled bedsheets. The air in the room was thick, heavy with a scent that was uniquely Ilya. A sweet, intoxicating bloom of omega pheromones that promised surrender and demanded possession. It was a scent that bypassed all thought, speaking directly to the primal core of Sejun's alpha instincts. Sojun stood by the bed, his chest a tight knot of restraint. He could feel Ilya's heat radiating from the mattress, a siren call to his senses. Ilya was on his side, propped up on an elbow, his dark hair a messy halo against the pillows. His eyes, usually so guarded, were now hazy with lust, and a vulnerability that was utterly captivating. The scent rolling off him was a deliberate, artful weapon, and Sujun was a willing target. So-yoon. Ilya's voice was a low murmur, husky with need. He shifted, the sheet sliding down to reveal the smooth, pale curve of his hip. Are you just going to stand there all night? It was the permission Seo-jun had been fighting against. He crossed the distance in 2 strides, his knees hitting the edge of the mattress. The scent intensified, a wave of jasmine and honey that made his head spin. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of Ilya's collarbone, feeling the frantic pulse beneath the skin. You're playing a dangerous game, Ilya, Sujun growled, his voice deeper than usual, thick with his own rising alpha pheromones, the sharp, clean scent of ozone and rain that was meant to answer, to claim. Ilya leaned into the touch, a soft sigh escaping his lips. Maybe I like danger? That was it. The last thread of So-yoon's control snapped. He lowered himself onto the bed, caging Ilya beneath him. Their pheromones clashed, and then mingled in the air, a perfect stormy harmony. So-yoon didn't wait. He captured Ilya's mouth in a bruising kiss, all the pent-up desire of the evening pouring into it. Ilya met him with equal fervor, his hands tangling in Sujuna's hair, pulling him closer, deeper. The kiss was a conquest, a surrender. It was all teeth and tongue, a desperate clash for dominance that Ilya willingly lost. So-yoon's hands roamed, mapping the familiar territory of Ilya's body with a new, desperate urgency. He could feel the slickness already gathering, the Omega's body preparing for him, and it sent a jolt of pure, possessive lust straight through him. He broke the kiss, both of them panting. So-yoon's gaze was predatory, as he looked down at the man beneath him. Ilya's lips were swollen, his cheeks flushed, his eyes dark pools of invitation. The sweet scent of his slick was overwhelming, a promise of the heaven to come. So-yoon, Ilya whimpered, arching his back. Please. So-yoon didn't need to be asked twice. He positioned himself, the head of his cock nudging against Ilya's slick entrance. He paused for a fraction of a second, looking into Ilya's eyes, and saw nothing but trust and want. Then, he pushed forward, sinking into the tight, wet heat in one smooth, deep thrust. A groan ripped from Sojun's chest. It was perfect. It was home. The feeling of Ilya's body clenching around him, the way Ilya cried out his name, it was everything. He began to move, setting a rhythm that was both punishing and reverent. Each thrust was a claim, a reminder of who Ilya belonged to. The sounds of their bodies slapping together, their ragged breaths, and Ilya's soft moans filled the room, a symphony of their shared intimacy. So-yoon lowered his head, his lips finding the sensitive skin of Ilya's neck. He could feel the frantic flutter of Ilya's pulse against his tongue. He nipped and sucked, leaving a dark mark that would be visible for days. A brand of his possession. "Mine," he snarled against Ilya's skin. "Yours," Ilya gasped in response, his hands clutching at Sojun's shoulders, his nails digging in. "All yours." The pleasure coiled tight in Sojun's gut, a white-hot fire threatening to consume him. He reached between them, his hand wrapping around Ilya's neglected cock, stroking him in time with his thrusts. Ilya cried out, his body arching off the bed as he teetered on the edge. "Come for me, Ilya," Sojun commanded, his voice a low, dominant rumble. The words were Ilya's undoing. With a sharp cry, he shattered, his release spilling over Sojun's hand and his own stomach. The way his body clenched around Sojun's cock in the throes of his orgasm was the final push Sojun needed. He drove into him one last time, burying himself to the hilt as his own release tore through him, filling Ilya with his seed. He collapsed onto Ilya, his weight pinning the smaller man to the mattress, both of them trembling and spent. For a long moment, the only sound was their ragged breathing as they struggled to come back down to earth. Seo-yoon rolled them to the side, pulling Ilya into his arms. The scent of their combined pheromones was a comforting blanket, sealing them together. He pressed a soft kiss to Ilya's sweat-damp forehead. Ilya snuggled closer, his head resting on Seo-jun's chest, right over his heart. "Stay," he whispered, his voice sleepy and sated. Seo-yoon tightened his arms around him, a wave of fierce protectiveness washing over him. "I'm not going anywhere." And in the quiet of the intimate night, surrounded by the scent of their union, they both knew it was the truth. Chapter 7. Before dawn. Morning crept in quietly. The heavy curtains bled faint silver at the edges, the city beyond still half asleep. The rooms smelled different now, cleaned by time, by distance, by the slow retreat of chaos. But traces remain. Ghosts of heat and instinct clung stubbornly to the air. Ilya woke with a sharp gasp. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. His body felt wrong, too warm, too sensitive, exhaustion weighing on his limbs like chains. Then memory surged back in broken fragments. Blue lights, a sweet drink, panic, a door marked Yon 160, and him. The Alpha. Han So-yoon lay on the bed nearby, turned slightly away, one arm flung across the sheets. Even in sleep he looked controlled, broad, powerful, untouched by the damage of the night. His face was calm, almost distant, as if the man who had knelt between instinct and responsibility had never existed. Ilya's chest tightened painfully. Shame washed over him in a suffocating wave. He pulled the blanket closer around himself, hands trembling. His clothes had been replaced with a clean shirt, far too large, smelling faintly of cedar and something darker. Someone had taken care of him. Someone he had never meant to burden. He ruined everything. Wendy. The thought lodged in his throat, choking him. He remembered the woman, the fiancée, the look in her eyes. There. Final. He hadn't understood the words then, but he had understood the ending. Doors closing, futures breaking. None of it should have touched him. And yet it had. Carefully, silently, Ilya slid out of bed. The carpet was cool beneath his bare feet. Every movement felt too loud, every breath too heavy. He gathered his scattered belongings, fingers fumbling as panic threatened to rise again. Leave it down. Before he wakes. Why none? He paused at the door, glancing back once. So-yoon hadn't moved. What? For a heartbeat, something dangerous tugged at Ilya's chest, a foolish, aching gratitude. A sense of safety he had never asked for and could never afford. I'm sorry, he whispered, though no one heard. Then he slipped out. Yandeli. So-yoon woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that rang hollow, like an echo after collapse. He sat up slowly, instinctively reaching out. Nothing. The bed beside him was empty. Cold. So-yoon's jaw tightened as he scanned the room. No omega. No scent. Only faint impressions lingering like bruises on the air. He stood abruptly, tension coiling tight in his frame. The suite was spotless, untouched, as if the night had been erased with ruthless efficiency. Only the discarded suppressant bracelet left on the table told him it had all been real. So-yoon stared at it for a long moment. Control had always meant order. Distance. Clean lines between cause and consequence. One omega had shattered all of it. His engagement was gone. His future rewritten without consent. And the one person at the center of the storm had vanished before dawn, leaving nothing behind but questions and a void that refused to close. So-yoon clenched his fist slowly. He didn't know the omega's name. He didn't know where he had gone. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. No matter how far Ilya Moon ran, this night would follow them both forever. Chapter 8. Collision. Han So-yoon did not sleep well after that night. He buried himself in work instead, meetings stacked back to back, voices blurring together, numbers losing meaning. Order demanded motion. Motion kept thought at bay. By the third day, it wasn't enough. Find him, So-yoon said, standing at the window of his office, soul stretching endlessly below. Quietly. His manager didn't ask which him. He only nodded once. Yes, sir. So-yoon ended the call and pressed his palm against the glass. The image of that omega, wide eyes, trembling hands, the way he had clutched at Soo-jun as if he were the only solid thing left, rose unbidden. Drugged, So-yoon thought grimly. Hunted. Winnie Woily. Someone would pay for that. Woilang. Ilya Moon felt the unease long before he understood it. The days after room 102 passed in a haze. He quit the blue bar without explanation, ignoring the bartender's surprised calls. He changed his route home, avoided crowded places, kept his head down even more than before. But fear had a way of finding cracks. It found him outside a convenience store, late evening, the street half empty and washed in white fluorescent light. He had just stepped back onto the sidewalk when a familiar voice spoke behind him. Ilya. His blood ran cold. Kang Gi-soo leaned against the brick wall, hands in his pockets, smile easy and pleased, as if they were meeting by arrangement. You disappeared, Ji-soo said. That wasn't polite. Ilya took a step back, then another. Don't come near me. Ji-soo's smile widened. Still pretending you don't know what you are. Ilya's pulse hammered painfully in his ears. What do you want? Ji-soo tilted his head, studying him. An apology would be a start. You made things complicated for me. Understanding hit Ilya like a blow. You drugged me, he whispered. Ji-soo shrugged. You shouldn't have run. Room 101 was prepared, quiet, safe. His eyes darkened. If you hadn't panicked, none of this would have happened. Ilya's hands shook violently. You ruined my life. Ji-soo laughed softly. No, I just sped things up. A shadow fell over them. Heavy, dominant, final, dull. Step away from him. Ji-soo stiffened. Han So-yoon stood a few paces behind Ilya, coat immaculate, expression carved from ice. The air itself seemed to tighten around him, alpha presence rolling outward with lethal calm. Ji-soo recovered quickly, forcing a grin. Ah, you must be. He didn't finish. Two men appeared from nowhere, gripping Ji-soo's arms with iron force. The smile vanished, replaced by sudden, naked fear. Wait, Yizu protested as he was dragged backward. Sojun, we can talk. Take him, Sojun said coldly. And make sure he never gets close to an Omega again. Jizu's voice faded as he was pulled away, the sound swallowed by the street. Silence fell. Ilya stood frozen, breath shallow, unable to process the sudden shift. He turned slowly to face Sojun. The Alpha's gaze cut through him, sharp, unreadable, heavy with something darker than anger. You, Sojun said. Ilya flinched. My engagement is over because of you, Sojun continued, voice even, almost detached. My fiancée walked away believing I betrayed her. Everything I built with her is gone. Ilya's eyes burned. I didn't ask for any of this. That doesn't change the outcome, Sojun replied. In my world, consequences don't disappear just because intent was absent. He stepped closer. Ilya backed up until his shoulders hit the wall. You will marry me, Sojun said. That is how this is resolved. The words hit harder than Jizu's confession. No, Ilya said immediately, voice breaking but firm. I won't. Sojun's eyes narrowed. You don't understand what you're refusing. I do, Ilya said, shaking now but refusing to look away. I won't trade one cage for another. For a long moment, Sojun said nothing. The city hummed around them, unaware of the collision that had just taken place. Then Sojun straightened, mask snapping back into place. Very well, he said coldly. Run then. He turned and walked away, leaving Ilya pressed against the wall, heart racing, unaware that fate had already begun tightening its grip around him once more. Chapter 9. The Devil's Bargain. The test strip slipped from Ilya's fingers and clattered softly against the sink. 2 lines. Clear, high, unmistakable. For a long moment, he simply stared at them, breath shallow, mind empty, as if understanding might arrive later, gentler, when he was ready for it. It didn't. Pregnant. The word hit like a physical blow. His knees buckled, and he slid down the bathroom wall, hugging himself tightly as panic flooded his chest. His body felt suddenly foreign, traitorous, something that had made a choice without his permission. Room 102 rose in fragments. Warm light, sea descent, strong hands that had steadied him when the world spun apart. An Alpha whose name alone felt too heavy to hold. Han Sojun Do. No, Ilya whispered hoarsely. Please, no. Tears blurred his vision, streaking down his cheeks unchecked. A child meant permanent. A bond that could never be undone. It meant being tied forever to a night that had already taken everything from him. He pressed a trembling hand to his stomach, fear coiling tight and vicious. I can't protect you, he thought. He can barely protect myself. Jianda. No. The messages began the same day. At first, they were reminders, short, polite, edged with false courtesy. Then the tone changed. You've been very quiet, Moon. You don't want this to get ugly. Ilya stopped answering his phone. It didn't help. They started appearing instead. Outside his building. At the bus stop. Across the street from the convenience store. Always watching. Always smiling like they already owned him. One night, a note was slipped under his door. Tomorrow. Well, that was all it said. Ilya didn't sleep. Meanwhile, the abandoned building loomed like a broken tooth against the gray sky. Windows shattered, walls stained with time and neglect. Ilya's footsteps echoed too loudly as he backed into the hollow space, chest heaving, eyes darting wildly. Please, he gasped, turning as footsteps closed in. I'll pay. I swear I will. Too late for promises. one of the men said, cracking his knuckles. You had plenty of chances. Another laughed softly. Boss says examples need to be made. Terror surged, sharp and blinding. Ilya backed up until his shoulder blades hit concrete. There was nowhere left to run. His body curled inward instinctively, one hand moving protectively to his stomach. A gun clicked. Then, no. Enough. The single word sliced through the air like a blade. The collectors froze. Footsteps approached, unhurried, deliberate. The air itself seemed to change, pressure dropping as a presence filled the space with quiet dominance. Han So-yoon stepped into the light. His expression was cold, eyes dark and unreadable. He looked at the men first, not at Ilya, and something in that glance made them stiffen instantly. Leave, So-yoon said. One of them hesitated. We were just. I wasn't asking. So-yoon lifted his hand slightly. That was all it took. The men backed away at once, fear replacing arrogance. As they retreated, one of them stopped, bowed deeply, and said without irony, Boss, the task is complete. The word rang in Ilya's ears. Boss? The men disappeared, leaving silence in their wake. Ilya turned slowly to Sejun, heart pounding violently. What did he mean? So-yoon's gaze finally softened enough to meet his. You're safe, he said. For now. Ilya shook his head. You knew. You always knew. Yes. The truth settled heavily between them, reshaping everything. The power, the reach, the way men vanished with a single command. Mafia data. So-yoon stepped closer. They won't touch you again. Ilya laughed weakly, hysteria edging his voice. Because you scared them, or because you own them? So-yoon didn't deny it. There's a condition, he said calmly. Ilya's chest tightened. Of course there is. You marry me? The words felt unreal. I won't, Ilya said automatically. I already told you. You're pregnant, So-yoon interrupted quietly. Ilya froze. So-yoon's eyes dropped briefly to Ilya's stomach, then lifted again. My child. Shame and fear crashed together violently. You don't get to decide my life, Ilya whispered. I don't, So-yoon agreed. But the world already has. He gestured faintly toward the exit, where danger waited patiently beyond reach. With me you live, you're protected, no one touches you, no one threatens you again. And without you? Ilya asked. So-yoon's silence was answer enough. Ilya closed his eyes. Every road led to blood, to fear, to loss. Except one. When he spoke, his voice barely held together. If I agree, will you leave me alone? Something dark flickered in So-yoon's gaze. No, he said honestly. But I will keep you alive. Ilya swallowed hard. Then, with nowhere left to run and a life growing quietly inside him, he nodded. I'll marry you. The words tasted like surrender. As So-yoon stepped forward, coat settling around Ilya's shaking shoulders, the truth settled fully into his bone. He hadn't escaped the devil. He had just accepted his hand. Chapter 10. The Golden Cage. The gates opened without a sound. Black iron slid apart, revealing a driveway that curved through manicured gardens glowing softly beneath hidden lights. The mansion rose at the end like a quiet monarch. Vast, elegant, impenetrable. Every surface gleamed. Every corner was watched. Ilya stood frozen at the entrance, fingers curled into the fabric of his coat. This is your home now, So-yoon said. The words should have sounded reassuring. They didn't. Men in dark suits stood at measured intervals, eyes sharp, hands never far from their weapons. They acknowledged So-yoon with subtle nods, their gazes briefly flicking to Ilya. not with curiosity, but with calculation. Asset, liability, protected. Ilya felt all three settle onto his shoulders at once. Inside, the mansion was breathtaking. High ceilings, marble floors, warm light spilling across carefully chosen art and furniture that looked too perfect to be used. Everything smelled faintly of polish and cedar, layered beneath the quiet hum of power. A woman approached, bowing slightly. "Welcome, sir. The room is prepared." She didn't ask Ilya's name. So Yoon guided him forward with a hand at the small of his back. Not rough, but firm enough to remind Ilya that this wasn't a suggestion. They passed through corridors that twisted and doubled back, doors opening only after guards scanned them. No windows opened without authorization. No exits went unmonitored. Ilya's chest tightened. His room was enormous. Soft bed, silk curtains, a balcony overlooking the gardens. It looked like something from another world. A cage built of gold. "You're safe here," So Yoon said, standing near the door. "No one enters without permission. And if I want to leave?" Ilya asked quietly. Seo Yoon met his gaze evenly. "Then you'll be escorted." The answer landed exactly as intended. Left alone, Ilya wandered the room slowly, fingertips brushing velvet and glass. Luxury pressed in from every side, heavy and suffocating. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at his hands. Pregnant. Married in name, if not yet in law. Belonging to the most dangerous alpha in the city. The door opened later that evening. So-yeon entered with two men. Maps and photos were spread across the table with efficient precision. "Rival groups are testing boundaries," one of them said. "They've noticed the change. Let them look," So-yeon replied coldly. "They'll see nothing." His gaze flicked to Ilya. "Everything." A shiver ran down Ilya's spine. "So, this is why," he said softly. "I'm leverage." So-yoon didn't deny it. "You're protected. But yes, your presence makes statements. And target." "Yes." The honesty hurt more than lies would have. That night, gunfire cracked the distance. Far enough not to be immediate, close enough to be real. Ilya startled awake, heart racing, only to find a guard already stationed outside his door. "Just a warning shot," the man said calmly. "Rival noise." Ilya hugged himself, staring at the ceiling until dawn. By morning the truth had settled deep and unmovable. Being Han So-yeon's Omega meant power flowed through him. And so did danger. In the quiet halls of the mansion, surrounded by wealth and weapons alike, Ilya understood at last. This cage wasn't meant to keep him safe. It was meant to keep everyone else afraid. Chapter 11. Blood and Jealousy. The mansion learned Ilya's footsteps quickly. Servants moved aside when he passed. Guards nodded, careful and distant. No one spoke to him unless spoken to first, except one man, Kim Do-yeon. He was one of So-yoon's lieutenants, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, but unlike the others, his presence didn't feel like a loaded weapon. He spoke gently, explained things without being asked, and never looked at Ilya like an object that needed guarding. "You shouldn't walk alone near the East Wing," Do-yeon said one afternoon as they crossed the garden path. "The cameras lag there. I'll report it." "Thank you," Ilya replied, surprised. Do-yeon smiled faintly. "If you need anything you can tell me." It was harmless, practical, human. And it was enough. So-jun noticed everything. He watched from the balcony above, jaw tight as he observed Ilya laugh softly at something Do-yeon said. Just a breath of sound, rare and unguarded. The alpha's scent shifted instantly, dominance sharpening into something darker. That night, blood was spilled. Not Ilya's. A rival courier had crossed into Seon's territory uninvited. The punishment was swift, brutal and intentional. When Sojun returned to the mansion, his coat smelled faintly of iron and smoke, his eyes still burning with barely lushed fury. He found Ilya in the sitting room, reading. "Who gave you permission to be outside with him?" Sojun asked. Ilya looked up slowly. "With who?" "Doyun." "I was walking," Ilya said carefully. "He was doing his job." Sojun closed the distance in 3 long strides. "You don't need his attention." The words were sharp, possessive. Ilya stood. He was just being kind. Sojun's hand slammed into the table beside him. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "You are mine," Sojun said, voice low and dangerous. "Everything about you reflects on me. Do not forget that." The room seemed to shrink around them. Ilya stared at him, disbelief slowly hardening into something brittle and bright. "I am not a thing you display." Sojun's eyes darkened. "You carry my child. You wear my name. That's your fear," Ilya shot back. "Not my crime." Silence fell, thick, volatile. Sojun stepped closer, towering, alpha presence pressing down hard enough to make the air tremble. "You will not speak to my men like that again." Something inside Ilya finally snapped. "No," he said. The word was quiet. "Final." Sojun stilled. "I didn't choose this life," Ilya continued, voice shaking but rising. "I didn't choose your enemies, your blood, your power games. I agreed to marriage so I could survive, not so you could own me." Sojun reached for him. Ilya stepped back. "I am not your property," Ilya said, tears burning hot and furious. "Not your weapon, not your possession." For the first time since they met, Sojun looked genuinely shaken. His alpha bristled, instincts raging, but beneath that, something cracked. Guilt, sharp and unexpected, cut through the jealousy like a blade. "Ilya?" "Don't," Ilya whispered. "Not tonight." He turned and walked away, footsteps echoing down the corridor, each one an act of rebellion. Sojun remained where he was, fists clenched, blood still metaphorically on his hands. He had ruled cities through fear, but the sight of his Omega pulling away, that hurt more than any wound an enemy had ever given him. Chapter 12. Escape. Ilya left before dawn. The mansion was quiet in that peculiar way only powerful places ever were. Never truly asleep, just waiting. Guards changed shifts with practiced silence. Cameras swept their up. Doors opened and sealed with soft mechanical breath. He moved through it anyway. A borrowed coat, cash tucked deep into his pocket. A suppressant patch pressed hard against the inside of his wrist, stronger than anything he'd used before. It burned faintly, biting into his skin as it forced his scent down, until he felt hollowed out by it. Good. Hollow meant invisible. His hand hovered over his stomach as he passed through the last corridor. Fear coiled there constantly now, wrapped tight around something small and precious. He couldn't protect this child inside those walls. Not from bullets, not from jealousy, not from becoming leverage with a heartbeat. At the service gate, a guard glanced at him, then looked away. No alarm sounded. No voice called his name. The gates opened. Ilya didn't look back. The train station smelled like oil and rain, and too many lives brushing past each other. Ilya kept his head down, ticket clenched tight in his palm, heart racing with every announcement over the speakers. He chose a seat near the back, by the window. When the train lurched forward, a strange, fragile feeling bloomed in his chest. Movement, distance, freedom. He pressed his forehead lightly to the cool glass and let himself breathe for the first time in months. The city thinned into suburbs, then into dark stretches of land blurred by speed. No guards. No walls. No eyes tracking his every step. Just anonymity. For 6 hours he almost believed it. He ate a small roll from a vending cart, nausea twisting his stomach but easing after a few bites. He dozed lightly, one arm wrapped protectively around himself, waking at every sound but falling back asleep anyway. No one touched him. No one knew his name. When the train slowed unexpectedly, unease crept in, but delays happened. Lines malfunctioned. Weather interfered. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, and went out. A murmur rippled through the carriage. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else cursed. Emergency lights flicked on weakly, bathing everything in dim red. The train screeched to a full stop. Ilya's pulse spiked. The doors at the front carriage opened. Footsteps echoed down the aisle. Slow, measured, unhurried. Every instinct in Ilya screamed. He looked up. Han So-yoon stood at the end of the carriage, coat dark, expression carved from shadow. Emergency light caught in his eyes, turning them almost black. The air shifted instantly, dominance rolling through the confined space like a storm front. Conversations died. Bodies stilled. Even the train itself seemed to hold its breath. So-yoon's gaze locked onto Ilya. Relief. Anger. Something raw and unmistakably hurt. All of it flickered across his face before the mask snapped back into place. Ilya, he said quietly. The sound of his name felt like chains closing. Ilya stood on shaking legs. I told you, he whispered fiercely. I won't be owned. So-yoon stopped a few steps away. He didn't reach for him. Didn't command him. That restraint was somehow worse. You ran, So-yoon said. Yes. You're pregnant? Yes. And you thought I wouldn't find you. Ilya's laugh was brittle. I hope. For a long moment, they stood there, surrounded by strangers pretending not to watch, by darkness broken only by red emergency light. Then So-yoon did something no one expected. He knelt, right there in the aisle of the train. Gasps rippled through the carriage. So-yoon lowered himself until he was eye level with Ilya, his voice stripped of command, stripped of threat. You said you never chose this life, he said quietly. You were right. Ilya's throat burned. I don't know how to love without control, So-yoon continued. But I am learning what it costs when I try. Silence swallowed them. I won't cage you again, So-yoon said. But I won't let you disappear either. Not you, not our child. Ilya's hands trembled violently. Freedom had tasted real, but so had fear. And standing before him now was not just the man who terrified the underworld, but the only one ruthless enough to tear it apart for him. The train lights flickered back on. The moment stretched, fragile and irreversible. And Ilya knew. Whatever he chose next would change everything. Chapter 13. War. War did not arrive loudly at first. It came as silence, too much of it. The mansion's alarms never sounded, but the guards shifted more often, their hands tighter on their weapons, their eyes scanning shadows that hadn't moved before. Phones rang and stopped. Names were spoken in clipped tones, then not spoken again. Ilya felt it in his bones. So-yoon was homeless. When he returned, the air followed him, sharp, metallic, humming with violence barely contained. He kissed Ilya's forehead once without realizing he'd done it, then left blood on the marble when he washed his hands. Stay inside, So-yoon told him that night. No matter what you hear. Ilya nodded. He had learned what that tone meant. The first shots rang out just after midnight. They cracked through the stillness like glass breaking, close enough that the windows trembled. Ilya jolted awake, heart slamming painfully against his ribs as shouts echoed through the grounds. Gunfire. Not warning shots. War. Guards flooded the halls, boots pounding, radios alive with overlapping voices. Lights snapped on. Somewhere below, something exploded, contained, precise, deliberate. So-yoon appeared in the doorway moments later, fully dressed, eyes cold and lethal. "Move him," he ordered. "No." Hands grabbed Ilya gently but urgently, ushering him toward a hidden passage he'd never been shown before. His pulse thundered as the floor slid open beneath a rug, revealing concrete stairs spiraling down into darkness. "What's happening?" Ilya asked, voice shaking. "Rivals," So-yoon said shortly. "They've crossed a line." A gunshot rang closer. The lights went out. Chaos surged. Someone screamed. Someone else shouted So-yoon's name. In the split second of darkness and confusion, hands pulled Ilya in the wrong direction. Too rough, too fast. A cloth pressed to his mouth. No. The world vanished. When Ilya woke, pain pulsed behind his eyes. The air smelled wrong. Oil, rust, unfamiliar alpha scents layered thick and hostile. His wrists were bound. His head swam as he struggled to sit up, heart slamming as reality crashed back in. He wasn't alone. "Good," a voice said lazily. "You're awake." A man stepped into view, smiling with too much satisfaction. "Your husband is very hard to lure out, you know. But you?" He gestured casually. "You're irresistible." Fear burned sharp and immediate. "What do you want?" Ilya demanded, forcing strength into his voice. The man laughed. "War." "Oh, Seoul burned quietly that night. Not with flames, but with bloodless precision. Cubs raided. Warehouses empty. Convoys vanished between intersections. Names at the top of food chains stopped answering their phones. Han So-yoon abandoned caution. Where once he had ruled with distance and strategy, now he moved like a blade driven straight at the heart. Safe houses fell in hours. Lieutenants defected or died. Entire crews surrendered rather than face him. "They have him," So-yoon said, voice stripped raw. "Find them." Every resource he had moved at once. He didn't sleep. He didn't negotiate. He tore through the underworld with singular, terrifying purpose. Ilya felt every hour pass like a wound reopening. They didn't hurt him. That frightened him more than violence would have. He was fed, watched, spoken to like a message rather than a person. "You should be proud," one of them said. "Men are dying because of you." Ilya swallowed hard. "Hell come." They laughed. "He always does." Nena. By the third night, the city understood. This was no longer territory disputes or power plays. This was a king tearing his own kingdom apart to retrieve what was taken. When So-yoon finally arrived, the building shook with the force of it. Gunfire erupted like thunder. Screams echoed. Doors were blown open. The men guarding Ilya barely had time to turn before they were gone, neutralized with brutal efficiency. The door burst inward. So-yoon stood there, blood on his sleeve, eyes wild and uncontained. "Ilya." The sound of his name broke something inside Ilya. So-yoon crossed the room in 2 strides and dropped to his knees, hands shaking as he cut the bindings away. "I'm here," So-yoon said hoarsely. "I've got you." Ilya collapsed into him, fingers clutching tight, sobbing into his shoulder as the war raged around them. Above the city, Seoul held its breath. By morning, the underworld would never be the same. Because Han Se-yoon had proven one undeniable truth. Anyone who touched his Omega would be erased. Chapter 14. Choice. The sound of gunfire still echoed faintly in Ilya's ears, even from the hospital room. He sat on the edge of the bed, knees drawn up, heart hammering against ribs that still felt bruised from the night's chaos. The sterile smell of antiseptic and machines did nothing to soothe the adrenaline still coursing through him. Han So-yoon lay on the adjacent bed, pale, bloodied, and unconscious, monitors beeping steadily to confirm that he was alive. Bandages covered his chest, arms, and shoulder, and yet even slumped in exhaustion, he looked impossibly strong. Dangerous. Dominant, even when broken. Ilya's hands trembled as he gripped the sheet. The thought of what had just happened, the rival gang, the abduction, the gunfire, the sheer chaos, and in the center of it all, the life growing inside him, made the fear unbearable. He hadn't thought he could feel so fragile. The door opened quietly, and a nurse stepped in, eyes flicking to Sojun, before settling politely on Ilya. You need to stay calm. He's stable for now, but any stress could... Well, you understand. Ilya nodded, swallowing hard. His gaze dropped back to So-yoon, his heart torn between relief and panic. Finally, So-yoon stirred. His eyes opened slowly, dark and stormy, scanning the room until they locked on Ilya. For a brief moment, he looked vulnerable, hurt, exhausted and raw. Then the faint spark of steel returned to his gaze. So-yoon's voice was hoarse, strained. He tried to sit upright, and Ilya hurried to help, fear twisting in his chest. You're hurt, Ilya said sharply, voice breaking. They could have... I'm here, So-yoon cut him off, grimacing as he shifted slightly. That's what matters. Ilya stared at him, eyes wide, trembling with a storm of emotion he could no longer control. No, you don't get it, he shouted, the words jagged and desperate. You could have died. And the child, our child, you could have lost them. Do you understand what I've been living with? The fear, the hiding, the running? You can't just put yourself in danger like that. So-yoon's dark eyes softened as they studied him. He reached out instinctively, fingers hovering near Ilya's hands. Ilya. No. Ilya pulled back sharply. No more words, no more excuses. I'm giving you one choice. One, you either protect us, all of us, or I won't survive this life. Silence fell between them, heavy and suffocating. So-yoon's jaw clenched. The alpha inside him snarled, instinct raging to strike back at the world that had dared touch his omega. But beneath it, something deeper, quieter, more urgent asserted itself. He looked at Ilya, the fear, the exhaustion, the raw vulnerability, and the life inside him. And for the first time in months, Seo-jun realized that there was something more important than dominance, more important than power, more important than the territory he had fought so hard to protect. He exhaled slowly. I will protect you, both of you, no matter what. Ilya blinked, disbelieving. Even if it means... So-yoon's hand closed around Ilya's, firm, unyielding. Even if it means everything else falls. The city, the gangs, my control. None of it matters if you aren't safe. I won't let anyone hurt you. Not ever again. Tears burned Ilya's eyes as he nodded slowly, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. Relief washed over him in fragile waves, but fear still lingered. You have to be smart, he whispered. No more rushing in, no more leaving me behind. You have to plan, So-jun. Strategize. We can't just survive, we have to survive together. So-yoon's lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly. I know. I will. You'll see. I won't fail again. For the first time since the war had begun, a fragile sense of hope settled over them. Ilya leaned against So-yoon's side as he lay back in the hospital bed, exhausted but alive, heart still racing. Outside, the city hummed with danger, but inside this room, there was peace, however temporary. So-yoon began quietly issuing new orders that very night. Increased security, more discreet patrols, contingency plan. The underworld would still exist, but he would bend it to protect his family. The empire would endure, but no one, not a rival gang, not a stray bullet, would ever touch his Omega or their child again. And for the first time, Ilya felt the weight of fear ease slightly. They had survived, and now perhaps they could begin to live. Chapter 15, Scent of Tomorrow. The mansion was quieter now, but the quiet carried a different weight. Not the tense, hollow stillness of fear, but a deliberate calm. Patrolled, watched, controlled. Guards moved with precision, eyes sharp but distant, weapons always ready. Yet, inside, within these walls, Ilya could breathe. He stood in the nursery, the soft morning light filtering through sheer curtains. Cradled in his arms was their child, a tiny, warm bundle with dark hair curling at the nape of the neck, fingers that grasped instinctively, and a scent that made his chest ache with protectiveness. So-yun sat nearby, back straight even as he leaned in to watch them, eyes dark with exhaustion, pride, and something softer that few ever saw. His hand rested lightly on Ilya's shoulder, steadying, grounding. There was still danger outside these walls, still enemies, still battles, but inside, they were safe. "Look at them," Ilya whispered, voice raw with awe and love. "Our child, our light." So-yun's lips curved faintly. "We earned this, and I'll protect it, every day." Ilya looked around the room. The warmth, the soft lullaby from a small speaker, the small stack of books already waiting for the child. Years of fear and running felt impossibly distant. He could almost forget the nights of hiding, the terror, the chaos that had clawed at his chest. Almost. But he didn't need to forget. He had survived. They had survived. And the life they held now was proof that fate could twist and test, and yet still give back. So-yun's hand found his, fingers entwining, strong and unyielding. Ilya squeezed back, feeling the silent promise behind the gesture. They would face the world together. The underworld might rage outside these walls, but inside, love reigned. Years later, Ilya would look back on this life with clarity. He would remember the blue bar, the drugged drink, the night that had changed everything. He would remember fear, panic, and helplessness. And he would see that all of it had led him here. To a life not dictated by terror, but by choice. A life where danger existed, but where safety, love, and family were worth every calculated step, every risk, every heartbeat. He bent to kiss their child's forehead, breath soft against warm skin. So-yun leaned down beside him, brushing hair from Ilya's face, and together they watched the first sunrise in their new life. That's all for today on Cherry Blossom BL Story. Thank you for watching. What do you think about this chapter? Did you like it, or do you think something unexpected is coming? Comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories.